Our first guest today is the president of the Ontario Black History Society and an author of multiple books about Black history and early societies. Natasha Henry runs a website and a blog called Teaching African Canadian History and is an in-demand speaker across the province. She's part of a Black History speaker series presented in partnership with Niagara Parks. Natasha, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about the topic that you will be speaking about on March 30th?
Sure, and thanks for having me. My talk is titled Sale of Said Negro Woman, quoted from a document related to the enslavement of Chloe Cooley in the Niagara area. And so on during my talk, I will be speaking about her experience, what is often known as the Chloe Cooley incident that took place in March of 1793. And I'll be contextualizing it to include the history of the enslavement of Black people in the Niagara area, but also in the province of what was then Upper Canada.
This was a very pivotal moment in the history of Black people because it was really felt it led to the abolition, in a sense, I guess we would say, in Canada of slavery.
Well, what it did was the lieutenant governor had attempted to introduce legislation to abolish slavery. However, about half of the politicians themselves enslaved Black people in the province. Many had brought them in from the United States during the American Revolution. And so the result was this act, the 1793 Act to Limit Slavery, which introduced gradual abolition that would take place over 3 years. But I think what it's important to center in this conversation around the 1793 Act is that it in fact confirmed slavery as an institution. It upheld it, and it said that nothing is to be construed that people who are enslaved now would be free. They would in fact remain enslaved unless the people that enslaved them manumitted them. And so but it also introduced a complication in that it said that, however, people who were enslaved elsewhere, should they be brought into the province, they would obtain their freedom. And so it introduces this complexity around who's enslaved and who then is offered freedom in this very same space of what we now call Ontario. And so Chloe Cooley's incident is important in terms of triggering the introduction of this legislation. And unfortunately, she herself did not benefit from it in becoming free, but has that legacy of having that impact.
It was a very violent incident, her enslaver tying her up, trying to get her across the border into New York State. But it happened right here in Niagara. I understand that her first enslaver was in the Fort Erie, at that time known as Bertie area, and Queenston in the town of Niagara on the Lake. So this is something that really hits close to home.
Absolutely. And Niagara was actually one of the areas in the province that had the larger concentration of enslaved people. Chloe was first enslaved by a settler by the name of Benjamin Hardison, who then sold her to Adam Vrooman in Queenston. And so, again, through her story, we get to learn so much about the workings of slavery. And actually, just recently this month, a new Heritage Minute was released by Historica Canada that is on the Chloe Cooley story. And so it gives us just a little bit of a visual reimagining of what her experience was like, and to learn more about that story.
Here in Niagara, I look at some of the developments over the last few years in St. Catharines. They've renamed a park, Richard Pierpoint Park. There is a street called Cooley Lane, named after Chloe Cooley, in the village in the town of Niagara on the Lake. So we are recognizing more of this Black history. In your opinion, as a historian who is specializing in Black history, have you seen a lot of change? Have you seen a lot more recognition of some of those very important names?
Yes, I have seen, some increased efforts in order to include Black stories and experiences in the public memory, in public commemoration, which is good to see. And this work has been led by a lot of Black community scholars, academic scholars, as well as generally local historians who know more about their local history. And so it's good to see that the Voices of Freedom Park in Niagara, I was able to work on that project as well. And that space, again, lends itself well to not only commemorating those who were enslaved and free, but a space for people to learn more about the continuing presence and history and contributions of Black people in the Niagara area.
With previous guests on this show, Natasha, I've discussed the need for a Black History Month every February. It's been 27 years since Canada first declared it in 1995. By now, shouldn't we be at a stage where Black history just gets rolled into the general history of this country as a whole?
Well, I see it in both and. I think how Black History Month is taken up is a bit problematic because people will squeeze everything into the 1 month. And that was never the intention of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who's known as the father of Black History Month. His intention was that people would learn throughout the year and then come together in this month of recognition to share what they've learned, to set agendas, and to continue throughout the year. So yes, it is my hope that we will move beyond. I think Black History Month is important to maintain as a particular institution and practice and a community practice, but that we need to see more throughout the rest of the year. And for myself as an educator and historian, want to see more in the curriculum in regards to Black history in Canada, so that, as you said, it becomes part and parcel of the narrative of the country.
That would entail a rewriting of a lot of the history texts that are being used in the school system right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's possible. I think these things need to be an ongoing process. We have to think of the ways that these stories play an important part and represent what Canada is. And so, as part of the every 5-year cycle, 8-year cycle, or whatever is being used by these organizations, that it is possible to continue to improve the representation of who Canadians are.
Have inroads been made in the education system recently?
There's been some inroads in regards to resources in our province in Ontario. There still are no specific mandated learning expectations that all students have to learn in Ontario about the 400-year history of Black people here. There are some options that teachers can choose to select to teach, but then again, it leads itself to a choice. And so we wind up every few years, every generation, people saying, wow, I never learned that, I didn't know that. And so sometimes it's like starting over again. And so what I would like to see is some learning expectations, some baseline information that everyone should learn about, again, this long, rich, complex history of people of African descent in this country.
That's long past due. Natasha Henry, thank you so much for joining us. March 30th, $15 for the online discussion about Chloe Cooley. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.